So today we're going to talk about Chapter 4, Mental and Emotional Well-Being in Older Adults. The learning objectives for this chapter include describing cognitive functioning in older adulthood and how it relates to common age-associated changes in intelligence, learning, and memory, describing different theories of personality and the factors that promote resilience and positive aging, demonstrating the knowledge of the different types of mental disorders among older adults, risk factors, and treatments. So one of the common fears of aging is memory loss and other issues with cognitive decline. But how common is memory loss or cognitive decline in aging? This chapter will cover the age-expected changes in mental health, including the likelihood of mental disorders or cognitive decline. So first, let's just talk a little bit about what is intelligence. Well, it's the theoretical limit of an individual's performance. And this includes biological and genetic factors, as well as environmental factors such as, learning opportunities, what your education was like, what things you had in your environment growing up, etc. So does intelligence decrease with age? Well, we'll talk about that. And it really depends on the kind of intelligence that we're talking about. There's many different forms of intelligence. We'll talk about what we call crystallized and fluid intelligence, and think about creativity and wisdom and just different things that could be considered intelligence. Okay, so fluid intelligence is kind of this idea of our native or our biological intelligence. This includes things like mathematical reasoning, spatial reasoning, perceptual speed. These are things that we kind of consider are more what we consider intelligence. So maybe like a IQ test or something like that. This is kind of what fluid intelligence would include. Whereas crystallized intelligence includes more of our education and our life experiences. So this includes things like verbal meaning, social judgment, and memory. So really understanding more about the environment around you based on your life experiences and kind of having street smarts, you might hear it called. Here's some examples of a test for intelligence and the difference between fluid and crystallized. So on the left, you'll see some types of things that they're testing for with fluid intelligence. So you'll see the circles with the pie chart kind of shape, and they're kind of looking at what's the sequence of those things, and can you figure out kind of spatial reasoning with that? And then they have another one about reading these colors without messing up. So you see green is actually in the color red, so it's kind of tricky. So that's kind of some examples of what fluid intelligence would be testing. Whereas crystallized intelligence, you'll see it says in each row, mark one word that exists in English. So that's that verbal. And then some questions about which animal is the fastest, which nation has the largest population. So it's a little bit more understanding of the environment around you. Hopefully that helps you see the difference a little bit. So, cognitive abilities develop quickly in early ages, but then slowly start to decline. As you can imagine with a baby or an infant, toddler, how quickly, in the first year of life, they're learning to walk, they're learning to talk, they're really learning a lot about the world around them very, very quickly. And so you'll see that that's the red line on our chart. It really, age goes along the bottom of the table here, that it really peaks very quickly. You're learning a lot in the beginning part of your life, and then you'll see the slow decline over time. Whereas crystallized intelligence develops much more slowly, but it suffers from a lesser decline later on. So you'll see that the yellow line is, a slower start. It's not rising as fast or as quickly as the fluid intelligence. At around age 40 is when you start to see cognitive crystallized intelligence kind of overtaking that fluid intelligence. So our wisdom and our life experiences are now more important or more useful to us than our fluid intelligence. And you'll see how those kind of have that crossover and continue on until older age. So how does aging affect learning and memory? Why do older adults tend to perform worse on standardized cognitive testing? Well, these tests have time constraints, and those time constraints are based on what it takes a younger person to complete the test instead of taking into account that an older adult might know the answer. It might just take them longer to get to that answer. So there's time constraints. And then we have typical age-related changes and sensory, perceptual, and psychomotor abilities. So they might have a little bit of a slower reaction time, poor hearing. If you're doing a verbal test, they might have a hard time hearing what the question even is. And again, just needing more time to perform. There also could be physical health issues that make it challenging. Older adults also have more cautiousness and uncertainty about their answers, so they might have the right answer but feel more cautious about marking it, and then just any sort of communication skills that are declining at that time. So how does this affect memory? What do we know about memory? Well, memory is the process of recalling information that was once stored, and it's the part of the brain that retains what has been learned throughout our lives. So a lot of people worry about memory loss in older age. So what kinds of memory are there? Well, there's episodic memory. This includes times, places, emotions, and this declines the most after age 60. And then we have semantic memory, kind of understanding words and meanings, and this shows the least decline with aging. And then procedural actions, like how to do things, like certain learned behaviors and skills, are retained well in older age. This does not show much of a decline. So kind of like that saying, just like riding a bike. You kind of never forget that muscle memory of riding a bike. That's kind of how procedural memory is. So it's kind of going in order here of most likely to see decline in older age versus least likely. So episodic memory is going to be a little bit more likely what you see declining in older age, semantic next, and then procedural last. So it's important to consider executive functioning when thinking about a decline in older age. So executive functioning is our ability to organize learning and then efficiently use the information to plan, make decisions, and shift attention from one task to another. And this has only mild declines with aging. So our executive functioning works pretty well. So there are some things that you can do to kind of improve cognitive abilities. We have cognitive retraining, memory mediators, and participating in physical activities. So the book goes through a number of ways older adults can work to retain and improve cognitive abilities. Things like practicing memory techniques, keeping the mind active through things like bridge, Sudoku, puzzles, and engaging in physical activity can help. Unfortunately, there are not really any strong research studies that link herbal supplements with memory at this time. So I know you've probably heard like ginkgo biloba or other things like that. There's not really much research on how those work with memory at the time. These things on this slide are more researched. Now, just to add, there's definitely other types of intelligence that maybe aren't able to be tested on a standardized test. So there's the idea of wisdom and creativity in older age. Wisdom requires not only the experience, cognitive development, and self-knowledge that comes with age, but also introspection, reflection, intuition, and empathy. Wisdom is thought to increase with age as we gain more life experiences. That makes sense. You probably, think older adults are wise because they have more life experiences. But creativity is also important. Creativity is the ability to bring something new and valued into existence, such as original ideas or products. This may increase with age as individuals become more confident, experienced, and free from social constraints, which is what your book describes as the liberation phase. So older adults often just feel like they have the time and ability and confidence to invest in their creativity. So when you think about issues of intelligence in later life, be sure to consider all the variations of intelligence, including wisdom and creativity. Not everything declines as we age. And the articles this week that are posted on the Beachboard page, there's one about scientists increasing productivity, like research scientists increasing their productivity as they age. And it's really interesting because it also talks about the average age of the Nobel Prize winner, and how that's, usually reserved for someone a lot older than you might expect in terms of, having these great landmark achievements. So it really goes to show that intelligence and all of these facets of intelligence can increase with age. We're not seeing declines in everything. So definitely check out the article that I posted because I think it's really interesting. Okay, moving into personality. Personality is a unique pattern of our innate and learned behaviors, thoughts, and emotions that influence how we interact with our environments. This is kind of like our temperament and how we react to people and situations, and this remains relatively stable after age 30. So this idea that older adults become grouchy may not be true. Often it's just, exemplifying the personality they already had earlier in life. And some of these, personality traits can be passive, aggressive, conscientious, neurotic, extroverted, agreeable, well-adjusted, maladaptive, dependent, or independent. So we'll talk a little bit about what some of these personality theories are. So you might have heard of Erikson's stage of psychosocial development in another class. This theory describes the stages we go through during the entire life course and how this develops our personality throughout life. And you'll see it starts infancy and what we're kind of doing at each stage of our life, the important crisis or task that we're working through, and what virtue we develop through that experience. As you can see, like infancy, trust versus mistrust. You're learning to trust or feel mistrust in whoever is supposed to be taking care of you. And then it goes through each age range. But of particular importance in this class for gerontology, we're kind of looking at the final two stages. So from 40 to 65, we're looking at generativity versus stagnation. So the middle age discover a sense of contributing to the world, usually through family and work, or they may feel lack of purpose. So that's what people in that age range are kind of grappling with, this idea of, are they generating something, providing something, giving something back, serving a purpose, or do they feel stagnant, kind of just existing with no real purpose? Whereas ages 65 and older, they're grappling with integrity versus despair. And so this is when they're reflecting on their life. The older adult feels a sense of satisfaction with their life or failure. So in this final stage, we see the older adult accepting their life and that it will soon be coming to an end, or feeling a sense of disappointment and despair that life is ending soon. So that's Erikson's kind of theory describing what older adults might be feeling in later life. There's also this more direct personality theory called the Big Five. And it says that we are made up of a varying level of 5 personality traits, including this acronym OCEAN. And so that's openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. And I think in your book, they call it something else in the book, but I don't have it listed here. So they talk about this in your book, and they include like the bigger study name that it's under. I think it's the BLS study. but it's also called the Big Five. Oh, and this link down here, you can go take the personality test yourself and see kind of where you range on all 5 of these traits. It's pretty quick, easy quiz. You don't have to pay to get the results, so I encourage you to take time to do it because it's kind of fun to see where you fall on these 5 traits. So what they found is that they looked at older adults, they looked at people in their younger years, measured their personality, and then followed them throughout the life course until they got older and kept measuring their personality to kind of see, of these 5 traits, which things were remaining stable or changing over time. And so of these 5 traits, they found that extroversion and conscientiousness remain relatively stable, that people exhibit in midlife. So if you're an extroverted person and you're very conscientious of others, that generally just kind of stays the same throughout the life course. Neuroticism tends to decrease. This may be due to just less work and family life responsibilities, less stress, less need for control over things because life is just a little less stressful. So neuroticism tends to decrease with age. And openness and agreeableness tend to increase as we age, and which really helps with adapting to all the changes that are occurring as you get older. So being more open to new experiences, being more agreeable, tend to increase over time. So thinking about emotional expression and regulation and how that relates to personality in later life, what we see in older adults is there tends to be a positivity effect. And this means that older adults remember positive emotional content rather than the negative. It's easier for them to kind of focus on the positive things that are happening and remembering that. And this is related to what we call socio-emotional selectivity theory. And this theory says that emotional well-being is better in later life. And you'll see a video I posted, I might have posted during the theory week, from Laura Carstensen about this theory. And it's a TED Talk about how older adults are happier, which is really interesting because you would think as you get older, you would get sadder, that things would be harder, but emotional well-being improves. So you'll see in this graph that it shows how the emotion trajectory is the solid line just increases in older age. So while maybe some of our knowledge that we're working to gain knowledge, thinking about gathering information, learning about the future, that goes down. That's the dotted line. Our emotional well-being and enjoying the present goes up. So you see kind of that crossover in middle age. We focus more on being happy than gaining knowledge and information. I think it's a really interesting theory, so take time to watch that TED Talk. Might be something you might want to use in one of your papers. We also have to think about self-concept and self-esteem in aging. Our self-concept is the cognitive image of ourself. This can be a challenging part of growing older. People tend to change or discontinue roles they had most of their life, such as their role in the workplace and their role as a prominent figure in their child's life. They're also faced with stereotypes as they age. So, saying they should or should not be participating in certain things that they might see as part of their identity. Older adults must find ways to feel good about themselves despite these challenges. Self-esteem, which is our identity relative to the ideal standard. Some older adults report feeling invisible because of their age, just that they're not really noticed or seen in public. And they feel, if you have social isolation, poor health, and high stress, this is going to decrease your self-esteem. But if you have social networks, participation, and positive aging stereotypes, this increases your self-esteem. These are things you can do to increase or decrease that. So an important part of this concept is what we call successful aging. This is defined as a combination of physical health and functional health, high cognitive functioning, and active involvement in the society. And these factors are characteristics of those that are aging successfully. Low risk of disease and disability, healthy lifestyle factors, active mental stimulation and problem solving, meaningful social contacts, emotional optimism, and actively contributes to society. This book discusses a few other views, such as robust aging and positive aging, resilient aging. Generally, they all have the same idea. Personality influences our likelihood to achieve successful, positive, resilient, or robust aging. Traits like humor, optimism, adaptability, openness, ability to let go, etc., are associated with positive aging. So again, personality is associated with what we consider successful aging. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about mental disorders among older adults. Normal psychological development in aging includes relatively minor changes in intelligence, learning, and memory, as well as overall stability and personality traits. This is what we've kind of covered in the previous slides, that, memory decline and cognitive decline, all of these things happen in a relatively minor way in most of the older adult population. You'll see some decrease in these things, but not everybody is being diagnosed with Alzheimer's and dementia, as we'll talk about in this section. And older adults actually have a lower prevalence of mental disorder than younger age groups, and these are not age-related disorders. So older adults that have mental disorders likely had them as middle-aged or younger adults, and it's just part of their health for their entire life course, not something they developed because of aging. However, some older adults do develop mental disorders in later life, and often these are associated with other health conditions that we'll talk about. So, depression is the most frequently diagnosed. 3 to 5% of older adults report having symptoms of depression. In terms of risk factors for depression in older adults, women are higher likelihood. Having a prior history of mental health issues increases your risk. Living alone, comorbidity, which is a word we've used in other chapters, which means having multiple health conditions. So having a lot of health issues can lead to feelings of depression. And having inadequate social support, which is a whole chapter that we're having coming up on the importance of social support. And in terms of management of depression for older adults, antidepressant medication is the most common thing used, but it can interact with all the other medications that older adults might be taking. So it needs to be discussed and things need to be worked out in order to get the right medication that will work for older adults. So also therapy and behavioral training and counseling can also be useful. Depression is the primary cause of suicide in older adults, and the highest rates of suicide are actually in older adults. So older adults have a 50% higher than younger group or population as a whole rate of suicide. And older men that are widowed, actually older white men that are widowed, have the highest rate of suicide among older adults. And you'll see in this graphic that older adults living alone report more long-term mental health conditions than those living with others. That kind of goes with that social support. Anxiety is pretty common as well. Pretty, as common as depression in terms of diagnosis. About 4% of older adults are dealing with anxiety. And in terms of cognitive therapy, they use cognitive behavior therapy, relaxation training, and again, medication, but having to think about making sure that medication works with their current medications. And part of anxiety that you might hear about more with older adults is paranoia and schizophrenia. Paranoia is an irrational suspiciousness of others, and this may occur because of social isolation, loss of control, decline in sensory abilities, and memory loss. However, this is often more connected with a specific health issue going on that can kind of create almost a delirium in older adults that might be able to be corrected a little bit easier than you might think by just fixing the original health condition that's causing it. There's also schizophrenia. This is less than 1% of people are dealing with something like this, and it's not really age associated. It's often something that someone would have been dealing with most of their life. It's connected to cognitive decline, depression, and social isolation. And again, these things are treatable with medications and other therapies. Okay, so let's get into what everybody is worried about. Thinking about Alzheimer's and dementia. Dementia is not an inevitable part of aging. A lot of people think that if you live long enough, you will have Alzheimer's or dementia, that everyone will eventually have this. That's simply not true. About 11% of adults 65 plus are diagnosed with some form of dementia. And dementia is defined as, dementia includes a variety of conditions caused by damage to brain tissue, which leads to a marked deterioration in cognitive functioning. Alzheimer's disease is the most common form, with 1 in 8 older adults having some symptoms of Alzheimer's. And dementia can lead to trouble with speaking coherently, recognizing objects, carrying out tasks, recalling events in recent memory, paying attention, orientation to time and space, abstract thinking, and showing good judgment. Most forms of dementia have no known cause at the moment, although a lot of research is being done to try to determine factors that lead to dementia. Your textbook actually talks about some of this research and the risk factors and possible connections for dementia and Alzheimer's. That's really interesting, so make sure you read into that. And unfortunately, there are no cures. So once someone's diagnosed, there's no way to reverse dementia and Alzheimer's. And your risks for dementia do increase with age. So it is associated with age. It's just not something that everybody will necessarily see in their lifetime. So here you can see how it is increasing with age. Each bar incrementally, the percent of population with dementia increases. So let's think about what are some normal physiological changes, and then what would that look like if you were to see it in terms of an Alzheimer's dementia type diagnosis. Because some people see things happening in older adults and assume that that must mean Alzheimer's dementia. So let's see what the difference might be. So for example, a normal aging behavior would be forgetting to set the alarm clock. Well, possible Alzheimer's would be forgetting how to set the alarm clock. Normal aging, forgetting someone's name and then remembering it later in the day. Whereas forgetting Alzheimer's might be forgetting a name and never remembering it, even when prompted. Normal aging, forgetting where you left your keys and finding them after searching. Possible Alzheimer's would be forgetting places where keys might even exist. So, if you're looking in the fridge for keys, rather than looking in the couch cushions, that might be more troublesome. So you can see some more examples of that there. So there are normal physiological changes to aging, and then there are ones that would kind of be more linked to a dementia diagnosis. And you can see more examples of this in the textbook as well. Now, there are no clear timelines on how Alzheimer's progresses in older adults. It varies from individual to individual. It proceeds through a series of stages, with symptoms becoming more prevalent and severe over time. Many older adults can live for many years with the disease, spending the majority of their time diagnosed in the final, most severe state. So the stages you can see here move through mild cognitive impairment to mild Alzheimer's, moderate, and then severe. And you can see how the symptoms, short-term memory loss becomes that plus reading problems, poor sense of direction, and then you start adding in poor judgment, impulsivity, short attention, and then as it becomes severe, visual problems, issues with just being able to complete any activities of daily living. So you can find a lot more detail about these stages and possible treatments to manage the disease, but not cure it, just manage it by reading the textbook. Another thing to think about in older adults is substance abuse. Alcoholism does decline with age, so older adults are less likely to deal with alcoholism, which is defined as 4 to 5 drinks in a single day. And older widowed men are the most likely to be having issues with alcoholism. And then drug abuse is really important to think about because older adults may be taking multiple medications, and so they may face what's called polypharmacy, which is this idea of taking more drugs than necessary or taking them incorrectly. Wanting to hit off the pain before it begins and taking your next dose of your pain medication an hour before you should, things like that. In terms of a summary, make sure you read the full summary in the textbook, but normal psychological development and aging includes relatively minor changes in intelligence, learning, and memory, as well as overall stability and personality traits. Fluid intelligence sees decline in aging, but not crystallized intelligence. Prevalence of mental disorders in older age is hard to determine and is not more so than what we see in younger adults. Depression and anxiety are the most common diagnoses. Dementia and Alzheimer are not inevitable in aging, but risk does increase with age.